Welcome back to Season 5 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 185, Season 5, episode 22. So most of the United States is pretty darn cold right now. That's quite a storm that came through and hit the U.S. You know, we had a little bit of a drop of temperature, but in California it's like nothing. But I was like, uh-oh, the rest of the country is certainly going to feel this one once it came through. And sure enough. So I've been praying for you guys and hoping everybody's safe. Hopefully you had your preps all ready to go. And if you lost power, you were okay and everything worked out for you. Definitely was saying some prayers from out here in Cali. We were supposed to have a big storm over the weekend, and I'm recording a little bit early, so we'll see what happens. But, it's always just a joke for me, having grown up in Michigan. The weather out here is kind of a joke, and besides summertime when we have wildfires, that's really the only thing that will hit us. But, I guess Southern California got a lot of rain. And with all the wildfire damage, then they have to worry about mudslides and things like that. So definitely a concern as far as that goes. But as far as like the big storms itself, it really doesn't happen out here. And I have to just laugh at, how crazy people get out here. They think it's so bad. And it's like, oh, man, you should see what the Midwest is doing. So anyhow, I hope everybody's safe. Everybody's doing good. Want to give a shout out to my Patreons. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. If you'd like to become a Patreon member, I've got lots of goodies over there for you, audio clips and just all kinds of stuff to make it worth your while. So you can head on over to www.patreon.com/changingearth or head over to my website at www.author.sarafhathaway and get hooked up with that. I also got all my merchandise out, got some t-shirts and some ball caps and stuff, and they're really, really neat. So head over there, check that out. So last week in Dark Days in Denver, everybody was getting ready to head out for Denver. And this week, we're following them on their journey to Denver. And Erica's, looking at the Rockies. It's an area she's not really familiar with, hasn't been through there a whole lot. And she's, looking out the window and imagining all the wild forageables that she could harvest there in the woodlands. And here to talk to us about that today is survivalist Eric Bocher. It's his first time on my show. And so it was a great honor to get him on the show. Finally, I met him both at Mesquite and out in Denver when we did the Self-Reliance Expos out there. Great guy, very, very smart when it comes to wilderness survival. And, you can pick his brain all day long as far as just minimalistic techniques that you can use to save your booty when you're out in the wilderness. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into Chapter 22 of Dark Days in Denver.
Chapter 22. The first item on the agenda in the morning was a visit to Mr. Rowan. Erica wanted to see his home and ask him if Nancy staying there was an option. He welcomed them warmly, and Erica was impressed with his setup. The art studio was amazing, and she could immediately tell which works Daniel's were, even without him pointing out all the incredible details. Erica was not surprised that the boy felt at home with Mr. Rowan. It was a heavenly place for him. Mr. Rowan welcomed Nancy's presence, and it was decided. The two would stay there while Vince and Erica were in Denver. After they moved Daniel's and Nancy's belongings, Vince and Erica went to gear up for the trip east. They were issued extra rounds for their rifles and handguns. Erica had them spotlessly cleaned. She slid her knives into their sheaths and strapped them in various places around her body. Star returned from the mess. She would be suiting up to go into Denver with them. There were people with less able bodies that would handle the meals for the soldiers. There was a moment of self-reflection as the sound of the Velcro on the ballistic vests crackled in their ears. How'd it go with Greg and Penny last night? Star wondered. I've been so busy I haven't seen Jen in a couple of days now. Erica stopped prepping her backpack and looked at Star. Nobody told you? She asked. Told me what? Star wondered. Greg's whole family went with Grandma and Grandpa's group. They needed able-bodied fighters since much of the force is going to Denver, Erica explained. Oh, crap. I would have liked to say goodbye, Star said solemnly. It was a sudden decision, Vince chimed in, watching his daughter deflate. I know. It's just with Dexter gone, and now them too, she plopped down on her cot. How we doing in here, folks? Kyle announced cheerfully, poking his head through the tent flaps. Star sat up quickly. Just getting ready, she told him. What can I help with? He wondered, stepping into the tent. We're pretty much all set, Erica announced, clipping the last strap down on her backpack. I'm set too, Vince agreed, shouldering his gear. We'll meet you two out by the gate. And don't forget your cloak, Erica directed Star. I got it, Mom, she replied, like she was still a little girl. Erica smiled at her as she left the tent. They were headed for the transports that would take them to Denver. The eerie sky was ever present, but the wind had picked up a little. They exited out the gate and saw a mass of soldiers all waiting for the transports as well. Staff Sergeant Gleason was at her side immediately. Are you nervous? Victoria asked. About what? Erica questioned, wondering what out of the myriad of things that Erica had to be nervous about Victoria was asking about. All those soldiers up there. After what happened when we left the homestead, she explained nervously. Erica could feel Victoria's tension increasing as they approached the crowd. Ignoring the feeling, Erica walked forward proudly. Vince was at her side, and the soldiers would need her positive vibes. The large group erupted into cheers when someone spotted her approaching. Erica waved at them, causing them to cheer louder. Noticing First Sergeant Bennett and Master Gunnery Sergeant Nicholton, she veered off in their direction. You all set to go, Cupcake? Bennett asked as she approached. Yeah, she replied shortly. What about you, Vince? Bennett asked, wondering why Erica was acting upset. I'm as ready as I'll ever be, he replied. Where's Star and Kyle? He wondered. They're coming, Erica told him. The crowd thundered again when Cassidy approached. She weaved through the crowd, greeting people as she went. Let's load up, Bennett, Cassidy announced jovially as she approached. How you doing, Erica? You ready for this? Heck yeah, Erica announced to Cassidy with a high five. Erica could feel the adrenaline starting to surge. They turned to the crowd, watching them load up. Cassidy grabbed Erica's hand and lifted it high into the air, clasped with hers. The mass of people roared in approval. Then Erica and Cassidy loaded into the bus. Nice to see you made it, Erica told Star and Kyle as they appeared in the doorway. The man looked sheepishly at Erica and Star blushed. We made it, didn't we? She defended. Just in time, superstar, Vince declared, feeding off the positive vibes the crowd was producing. I got an extra seat here. Star sat down with Vince as the buses were loaded. They were one of two buses headed for southern Denver. How big is the force meeting us? Erica asked Cassidy, watching the activities surrounding the buses. As always, Philip and Eli were present and occupied the seat in front of them. Staff Sergeant Gleason and Sergeant Hensley loaded on the bus as well. Gear's friend Ned had also decided to join the fight. It's a prepper group, about 500 strong, not extremely well armed, but tenacious as ever. Lieutenant General Merkley is sending arms with us so they can be a serious threat that must be reckoned with, Cassidy explained. Lieutenant General Merkley sent his son to handle the exchange. That guy could make a diamond in his ass. It's so tight, she chuckled. Erica laughed at her joke, soaking in the information. Looking out the window, Erica saw Staff Sergeant Merkley headed towards the second truck. He was accompanied by 5 very formidable-looking fighters. I've never seen those guys he's with before, Erica commented. They look tough, though. New recruits. We've been flooded with them, Cassidy said, getting up from her seat. I'll be right back. Eli rose and followed Cassidy down the aisle to the front of the bus. Bennett came and sat down in Cassidy's seat. What's up? He asked directly. Again, Bennett? Really? Erica accused. Bennett looked at her naively. Again what, Erica? Why didn't you tell me? Erica asked him. Tell you what? Bennett wondered. That Yellowstone is in the process of erupting, Erica told him. What? He asked, concerned. Don't play dumb, Bennett. It doesn't suit you, Erica accused him again. Erica, I don't know where you got your information, but I haven't been informed of that situation, Bennett said honestly. Erica studied him carefully as the doors to the bus closed. Please don't analyze me like that, he requested. I'm telling you the truth. Who told you that anyway? Erica didn't want to tell him. She would have to report on her activities. Where did you hear that? He asked again as the bus started to roll forward down what was left of Highway 295. You know the restricted access door at the camp? She asked. Oh, no, you didn't, Bennett told her, chuckling to himself. We did, Erica admitted with a sly smile. Bennett turned around to look at Vince in the seat behind them. You were in on this? Bennett wondered. Star laughed at the antics of the three of them, but listened intently. This was all news to her as well. Yeah, Vince confessed. What's back there? Bennett asked, turning back to Erica. Scientists, I guess. We ran into Brad, Erica told him. That little turd from Minnesota? Bennett asked. Yup. He told us that Yellowstone is erupting, Erica informed him. Bennett pondered the information for a moment. Then we're all screwed, right? Brad doesn't think so. He thinks the quakes and fissures have released so much pressure that the eruption shouldn't be as impactful as predicted. But Merkley thinks he can use the eruption to keep us secure from the air attacks, Erica told him. We have anti-aircraft missiles on hand. They will attack from the air. The Air Force Base Academy was in Colorado Springs. We're hoping we can recruit some of their pilots, Bennett told her. That explains why the brass insisted we have gas masks for everyone. There weren't enough, though, so they had the soldiers making them with activated charcoal. I thought it was because of a chemical threat, not a volcanic one, Bennett thought out loud. Erica watched the spruces and firs going by out the window. She would have loved walking through the woods collecting juniper berries and wild strawberries. The mountains loomed gloriously in the distance as they bumped along the deteriorating road. How did you let your parents go north when you knew about the volcano? Bennett asked Vince out of the blue. They couldn't go south, Vince answered, looking at Bennett with sad eyes. The refugees are flooding the small slice of Texas that's left. Brad said they would be okay going north. They may have to shelter in place for a day or two. If I had told them, it would only have given them more to worry about. I told Greg, and he said he'd look out for Mom and Dad, Vince explained. Erica was lost in thought, still staring out the window. She was thinking about Dexter. Worrying about him was breaking her heart. You here, Cupcake? Bennett wondered. Yes, sir, Erica replied instinctually, but her eyes were glassed over and her mind was elsewhere. Remember what I said about staying focused, Bennett corrected. I'm here, sir. Go on, Erica snapped. These people we're going to meet have only heard your legend. We need you to make a strong appearance as well, Bennett instructed, as the bus traversed the mountainous highway. Don't I always? Erica replied. But I know your head is somewhere else, he told her. Same place mine is. Worrying about Dexter, Vince said. Look, guys, I've been out with Dexter and Johnny. Those boys can blend. If they wanted to disappear, they easily could, especially with Ponover on the trail. No offense to her, but she's not the best tracker. Wherever they went, they didn't want to be followed. They're probably fine, Bennett assured them. Regardless, we still have a mission to do, and I'd like to see you live through it. Yes, sir, Erica agreed. Vince? Bennett wanted confirmation. Yes, sir, he concurred sharply. The bus turned down Highway 65. It was a small backwoods road that had sustained a lot of damage in the Great Quake. The natives patched it and it was passable, but it was not a smooth ride. There were aspen trees lining the canyon bottoms, and great pines loomed in the distance. They were entering more of a riparian area as they closed in on Denver. Once we rendezvous with this cell, we'll attack South Denver. We're going to try to draw the feds out of the Air Force Base and the airport tunnels, Bennett explained. Then the Mercs can attack their flanks and drive a wedge into their forces. Our biggest threat is going to be the snipers and the shells of the city. Hopefully the planes will stay grounded, but if they go up, we'll take them out. I'm with you, sir, Erica replied attentively. She knew the time for action was approaching. That's Sedalia, Bennett pointed out as the sun dipped into early evening. Tensions are high as they roll into Sedalia, the suburb of Denver. Along the way, Erica wished that she was stomping the woodlands and collecting food instead of heading out into battle. Here to talk to us today about all of the really cool things that she could have been harvesting out there in the Rockies is survivalist Eric Boettcher. No food, no water, no shelter. Could you hack it? Eric Boettcher is an award-winning triple book author and survivalist who has mastered the skills and techniques for thriving in the most harsh of situations through his minimalist approach of survival. By learning how to use what is on your person and your natural surroundings to your survival benefit, anyone can change the game. Learn from Eric Boettcher, survivalist, a full-time outdoorsman, survivalist athlete. You will never look at your environment the same. If you'd like to check out Eric and all the cool stuff that he's doing, head on over to ericboettchersurvivalist.com. That's EricBoettcher survivalist.com. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Eric to the show.
Today, I am honored to have one of my good buddies on the show, Eric Boettcher. Thanks so much for being here, Eric. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's been fun to travel around all over the country and meet up, and it's been awesome having me.
Running into you all over the place, Texas, Denver, that's cool. And you got to meet some of my family along the way and stuff like that. So, you never know when you're going to run into a friend. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Just kind of give the listeners a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I teach survival. I teach specifically minimalistic survival. So I'm more about getting you to know things rather than have things. Now, I love having things, but what I have learned is that you're not going to have every bell and whistle when, the proverbial excrement hits the fan. So you need to know things, because even if you have limited resources, if you learn how to use that resource in every way possible, be like an outdoor MacGyver, those resources are going to go much, much further. And so I'm a friction fire expert. I've got 3 different books I've written. Bushcraft is definitely a basis of what I teach, but I get into, there's no such thing as cheating. So if we're using a 9-volt battery or napalm to start a fire, or just a couple sticks, I don't care how you do it. We're going to learn every way there is to start a fire, and every other important aspect of survival, we cover it.
And you're not lying when you say you're a friction fire expert, man. I'm just so blown away with how fast you can start a fire with that bow. I'm like, really? Come on now. It's really cool, actually. Do you have that YouTube or something that you go check that out?
Yeah. So I've actually have an entire video series that goes with my book. So any technique that I teach in my books, I actually have a 10-minute video associated with it. And I add 2 to 3 videos a week so that you can read and you can engage visually as well. And I go through all 5 friction fires. So if you've ever really just thought, oh, someday I want to be able to do that, I will teach you wood compatibility. The reason I can do it so fast in any of the methods is because I understand the materials I'm using and body position, and I'll even get into humidity factors and which one best matches your environment. So yeah, we can cover that and a whole lot more.
Super cool.
You can find all of that on ericboettchersurvivalist.com.
All right, now you got to spell your last name for folks, because they won't know how to spell it. I didn't know how to spell it.
I know, it keeps telemarketers away, but the rest of them can't find me. So my last name is spelled Boettcher. It's German.
Perfect. Nice. Yeah, I'm like I say, blown away by the your fire starting capabilities. So I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good at it. And then I watched you, and I'm like, yeah, I suck. So
no, I guess I teach a course up at Snowbirds where I teach that specific course about 2 to 3 times a week. So it's practice makes perfect, but there's always room to improve, because you have to imagine that perfect scenario in which we're always practicing it.
Right.
When we start fires, it's in the worst possible scenario. And so when it seems really easy, inside, then make the wind blow and the snow come down, and then even if you're really good, it's still going to be really challenging.
Yeah, my husband and I always laugh about that with like the magnesium stick, oh, you got your little pile and you flick the little spark right in there. Yay, right? But when that wind's whipping, the rain, everything, there goes your pile. I mean, it's just, you're like, this is a nightmare.
Exactly. But I'm sure we'll get into that in just a little bit. But yeah, it's a good thing to know, though.
Yeah, so today we're talking the Rockies. I got my crew and they're driving through the Rockies, and my main character, she is a woodlands girl and she loves wild foraging. So I wanted to bring a little bit of that knowledge to everybody that's out there around the Rockies. And so if you were out in the Rocky Mountains, what are the 3 most commonly available wild forageables that you'd be on the lookout for? Now, the Rockies have like this huge eco diversity. So something that, you're going to find in a lot of the climate areas.
Yeah. Well, in the Rockies, you and I could go on a hike and start at 2,000 feet above sea level and end up at 8,000 or 9,000 or 10, depending on the day. The biodiversity is going to depend greatly on our elevation. And so that is the one thing that everybody's like, what are the 3? Well, it really depends on what elevation we're at. If we're in the lower wetlands, one of my go-tos is cattail. Cattail is like just a supremo, and I can harvest that year-round for all intents and purposes. Even in the winter time, I can still go down to the roots and I can still do stuff with cattail. Now, it may not taste as great as the beautiful green shoots in the spring, but there is more starch than a potato in a cattail, and the cattail will keep me alive. But again, much above 8,000 feet, you just don't see cattails. And 8,000 feet is actually pushing it with cattails.
Yeah, for sure.
Other things, and again, the time of the year. A lot of people are focused like, oh, what berry? Well, like for service berries. I love service berries. They're easily identifiable. They're out there. But guess what? You have about 3 weeks that you can actually eat them.
Exactly.
So it's like, and so it's a hard question, especially with berries, because I would say with berries, now berries, I would say is my second favorite, but I can't just answer it with one. I would like you to learn 10 berries, and I would like you, because they start, anywhere from July, and you can harvest berries clear through practically November in some instances. So I would like you to figure out your berry season, and then berries can then be a second viable option for you, but you've got to widen the scope for it to even be viable. So, your elderberries, your service berries, you've got your choke cherries, and also understand that some of these, especially with berries, sometimes the leaves and stems are toxic, like with elderberries, and just the berries themselves are edible, or at different stages they're edible and not edible. So berries, I would say definitely don't just learn one, learn 10, and then pick ones that are ready and ripened at different times of the year to be able to count that as a viable option. Other ones I like, as far as foraging, learning how to process acorns is probably one of the biggest, but you need to learn how to leach them. But again, that can actually turn into a year-round food for you. And so I think between the nuts, your cattails, and your berries are probably the things that I go to the most. Pine nuts, of course, are really great as well. But it's gonna depend where you are, because you don't always find pinyon pine. So you've got to learn your area, because what I found in Utah, I could come over to your neck of the woods, and it may or may not be relevant there. So you've got to be the expert on your region. I would even say down to the county that you live in. Anyway, sorry, that was long-winded.
Yeah, and then I even think of like, okay, so if we had to leave our house, because I want to bug in first, but if we had to leave our house, what geographic areas will we be traveling through, and then know those areas as well, because everything changes, like in the mountains especially. It's so drastic from just one elevation to the next.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I like is like, yeah, a lot of people, everybody's so focused on bugging out. Really, your focus should be on bugging in, because you bug
Right.
out and guess what? You've got 50 pounds of stuff and maybe whatever you hope to fit in the car. And that is it. So I love redundancies. And I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of survival caches. So like if I'm bugging out somewhere, well, guess what? I'm partially bugging in because I've already placed something there. You can only carry so much. If you're able to lighten your load and have something waiting for you on the other side, even in a bugging out scenario, it will drastically change your situation. Because again, with foraging, you're so dependent on environmental factors, even to, was it a good frost year? Was it a bad frost year? Was it a drought? Was the material, the plants that were really thriving last year, maybe they're not even there anymore, or maybe, you know, an animal wiped them out or a parasite. Those are variables and they're not constant. The constant is you going and placing something there, and that is something you can rely on. Foraging for me is something I supplement. I supplement supplies I've already put there. And it might be really good where I don't have to depend on the supplies, or maybe I'm completely out of luck, but am I? No, because I built in a redundancy and I'm going to be fine because I prepared. I planned to fail several different times. So every time I plan to fail, I actually give myself a safety catch solution. And it lowers that risk factor. But foraging is awesome, but as a backup plan for me.
Yeah, right. And that's if you have property and whatnot, you know, start planting some of the forageable stuffs around you. And that way, even when you're bugging in, you can use that as the, you know, you don't want to just eat that freeze dried food. You're just going to kill yourself on that stuff. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. If there's a 25-year shelf life, it will pass through your system a lot faster than that. It will take a lot with it.
Right.
I do a lot of gear reviews. So there was there's a pretty common company. I won't name them, but they had the standard 25-year shelf life food storage. I did 3 weeks of nothing but just food storage. And I will tell you that it may sound gross, but it gives you the runs. You lose everything. You're losing water. You're losing salts. You're losing everything. It makes you ill. So something that is great with foraging is maybe cutting back on how much you're actually using of your food storage and combining fresh food with food storage. It makes it so much more tolerable on your body that you're actually going to absorb the nutrients necessary to thrive and live.
Yeah, and that's a harsh reality. Like that's a harsh reality when you understand that. Everybody's like, oh, well, I got 50 years, you know, I've spent, you know, $7,000 making sure my family is going to have the food supply. I'm like, yeah, but have you looked at it? Have you tried to eat it? Like, do you know how much sodium's in there? I mean, you're going to be dead. you need to supplement.
It's a fluffy pillow, but it makes you sick. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. So one of the things that I found just researching the Rockies and what's out there is like wild strawberries. They talk a lot about wild strawberries. So how much do you actually like? Yeah, they say it's in the Sierras too, but you know you don't find that many of them. Is that something that is actually that prevalent there?
I have actually found they're a lot more prevalent in the Sierras, up clear into like Washington, Oregon.
Okay.
In Utah, I'll be honest, I know of one place in Utah.
Okay.
And I actually believe that one place has actually been planted. So I think some of the drier areas very much struggle with wild strawberries. We do get raspberries up here, and that's kind of where I'm not going after strawberries. If you live in a drier state, you can definitely still find raspberries near water sources, and that's something that I would say a little bit more viable. One thing that I do like about the wild strawberries is they will regrow. It isn't a one-time, you know, this is it harvest. They have a longer growing period, and so there's something always ripening over the course of, sometimes a month, 2 months, and so you can harvest it more than once, which is a great thing about wild strawberries. But they are small, they are little.
Yep.
You're always doing that cost and effectiveness, like how many calories am I burning harvesting something? Is it calorically, does it make sense? Does the math equation make sense?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to hike 3 hours
gotcha.
for a handful of berries.
Mhm.
So again, these are all those things you got to kind of plan out.
That's true.
But yeah,
I didn't really think about that. Like okay, I know they're there. I'm going to hike out, 5 miles to get there. And then what? Yeah. How much am I going to actually get? I like that point of view. I didn't really think about that.
It's a big math equation. We've got that pendulum right there. I always tell people it's a survival pendulum. Sometimes we can use too much of our resources, and so the pendulum swings the other way. We're actually wasting. Or we're using too little, and then all of a sudden the pendulum swings the other way. We have this fine balancing act of keeping our own survival pendulum, which, if I was going to name that balancing act right in the middle, that's called thriving. Okay, you keep that in the middle, you're thriving. But there's so many factors that come into keeping that needle right in the middle, and that is based on knowledge, practice, adaptability, and it's constantly changing. Actually, like the title of your series, the Changing Your series, because change is the only constant. So your one survival plan should always be evolving, because change is the only thing that is the constant in the universe and in nature and in our lives. So you've got to always adapt.
Yeah, that's exactly my point of view. So many people think of the planet as like this stagnant place that is not breathing and moving and doing its own thing. And, we've had to adapt before, that we've lived through ice ages and things like this. And for us to think that it's just going to be this steady, climate planet forever is just silly. We have to keep the relationship with the planet so we remain adaptable with the planet's changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, and the more even having your heated house and your air conditioned house, and we create so many false environments for the human body to live in. And, you have to be able to adapt to what your planet's doing in case you didn't have your technologies anymore.
Oh, yeah, which at some point, I guarantee you, everybody listening will be without those comforts. And it really is up to them, whether it's a shock or it's a slight discomfort, or maybe it's even fun. It's a vacation. If you have never gone without a convenience for more than 4 days, I would invite you. This is the best way to find out where the holes and the gaps are in your own personal survival plan. Shut them off. Right before we went to Denver, the last time I saw you, I shut the water off in my house for 6 weeks, because I was trying to figure out how would I do it. I started out with 120 gallons of water, and I don't live near a water source, and so we had to get extremely creative on how to do that. I will tell you, I know more about bugging in and taking care of the number one thing, which is water from a home. And I've got a video on that. And but unless I actually shut the valve off and committed to that, maybe it'll be slightly different for you because you live in a different area. Everybody should take a chance, shut off the water or shut off the power and actually live it. One of the most dangerous things I hear repeatedly, especially when you and I go and speak at places, there'll always be that one or two guys or gals that will say, I would if I had to.
Yes.
It's so dangerous. They get stuck in theory. Yep. In theory, in their head, they're already convinced, well, if I had to, I could do it. But we all know that is make-believe pretend. The only way we know we can do something is if we've already done it. Yep. And, so a lot of the people that listen even they've heard, they say, oh, I've heard that. I've heard this. I plead with everybody, take probably a lot of the vast theory knowledge you have and put it into action, because then it subsequently turns into what you would like it to be, skill and knowledge. We've got to get out of the theory area, because theory will kill you.
I agree. And when you're faced with that necessity, that's what gets you to grow and develop beyond it, to actually realize and create oh, I have this problem, I need this solution. But if you don't create the problem, then you'll never know the solution.
Exactly.
That's an awesome point of view.
True story. We could cheer each other on, but It is the truth, though.
It is.
Inconvenient at times, but it's the truth.
So let's get back into some of the wild forageables. We talked a little.
Yes,
You talked a little bit about the berries, and that is the
Yeah.
dilemma, right? What season is it, and what elevation are you? Because it's going to be so dramatically different. So across the Rockies. So let's go into out here. There we have wild onions up in the mountains. They're awesome. But then the death camas also grows right with them, and that one is highly poisonous. So are there similar things to that going on in the Rockies? Like, are there some that we should be really aware of the lookalikes?
Yes. So in my first book, I actually don't include any plants that have a toxic lookalike. And there's actually a lot of plants that have a toxic lookalike. Like with death camas versus wild onion, one of the easiest ways for somebody new at it to tell, one smells like an onion, and the other does not.
Yeah.
That is, but you also, a lot of people, and especially with beginning foragers, and I'll get into the other thing, but you've got beginning foragers spend time identifying, not trying. Identifying. So I'll go in further, but when you're just starting, I just want you to learn the plant. So out in the Rockies here, if I go down to southern Utah, we've got our pinyon pines. Pine nuts have a more calories than anything else I can forage. Pine nuts are awesome. But they also only really occur in like southern Utah, Four Corners area, New Mexico, Colorado. That area has a ton of them. Even the Anasazi, that was a main staple food for them down there.
Right.
Another great resource down there, you got your prickly pear cactus. That is another annual one you could harvest. So even when it's not producing its fruits, if you know how to prepare prickly pear cactus, it is a very great, nutritious plant that you can harvest at any time.
Okay.
And it's a good one. Make sure you don't over harvest them. You only want to take a few pads. You never want to destroy what feeds you.
Yes.
Don't over harvest. Okay? Because next year when you're hungry and you killed the plant the year previous because you were greedy, it won't bear fruit, literally, for you. So the plant thrives and you thrive. They have stuff that's meant to be eaten as long as you don't take it all. Other things like one of my favorites, like right now, I'm actually getting over a little bit of a cold, and I went out and I harvested something called Mormon tea or green ephedra, or it's also called brigand tea. That is another annual thing that you can harvest that got a lot of vitamins, minerals, but it's also a vasodilator, and it treats upper respiratory conditions. I've been pretty congested, and I will tell you, it just works amazingly, and it's a great tea. It'll store year round. A lot of the stuff that you can harvest and that you can store, where it can be more difficult with some of the other things that you harvest, that can help your survival caches. Can I store this? Yes, you can. So then another one that is great that I actually harvest right now are your rose hips. Rose hips, when you go from fall, that rose hip can be harvested, processed, and eaten because it naturally dries right on the wild rose, almost clear till like May, clear till the plant is then regrowing again. It has huge amount of vitamin C, tons of sugar in it, tons. I mean, they make alcohol out of it. I mean, for heaven's sake, it has tons of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates. It can be dried. You boil it down, get your seeds out, and that one is such a huge winter resource for me that I can get almost anywhere. There's a little bit of water, you'll find rose hip. You just will. Another one that I'm harvesting currently right now is mountain ash. Now that will dry right onto the tree, and a lot of the birds, it grows in such quantities that the birds seem to leave it alone. That's made into a really good jam, or if I'm making I can actually add it into a pemmican, which is I don't know if you've talked about that much, but I actually add that into my own personal pemmican concoction. So it's kind of bland by itself, but it's a really good filler. One of the things that people learn as they get more into foraging, it's kind of, we add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and maybe we don't select something exactly for its taste, but when we mix it with other things, then it becomes this big amalgam of awesomeness. It's like, oh, all together, this is awesome.
Yeah, the nutrition that it provides. So is it from the mountain ash tree?
Yes, there's actually several different subspecies, so it really depends where you live. But to my knowledge, all of them are edible. You may need to, some you need to leach, others you may need to process a little bit. They're very mealy, so that a lot of people will ask me, can I eat that? Well, there's kind of a small slice of the pie where you're just grabbing something and popping it in your mouth. Now, there definitely is a slice of that pie, but if you learn just that, if you how to cook and process stuff, man, your pie got so much bigger. We were talking about acorns before. Yeah. You eat an acorn, it's going to make you sick. Yes. But if you learn how to process an acorn, guess what? You're making bread. You're living well.
Granola bars, they're so yummy. Yeah. Mountain ash, is it similar to manzanita, like a manzanita berry?
I don't know enough to answer that question. Okay. I believe so.
It's different climate zones, right? And that's why I just don't know about that one. So that's a new one. I'm gonna have to check it out. Okay.
Yeah. Then even like there's other things, like if you, like, say you harvest. I go out in Moab. I was able to harvest a jackrabbit. And one of my favorite ways to actually flavor meat is with juniper berries. So you take juniper berries, you can get them all year long, mash those up into a poultice, and they go fantastic. Maybe a lot of stuff that we forage or even hunt can be bland. We still want food to taste good. And things like pine nuts or pine needles or
sage
or even wild onion adds a ton of flavor to food. Yep. So it doesn't have to taste bad just because you don't have, all the bells and whistles.
It's true.
Another thing, it's kind of bland, but it has a lot in it. So both in certain types of pines and aspen trees, you can actually eat the inner bark. And if you harvest it carefully so you're not hurting the tree, the inner bark can be eaten, it can be milled, it can add where you maybe have something that you've harvested that doesn't have a lot of substance or calories to it. That's where drying the inner bark and mealing it up into a flour, you can add that to almost any meal that you're eating, and it's going to add a ton of nutrition. And that is another one of those annual type of foraging things that you can use. I love when I have a plant or a food source that I can count on year round. And those are the ones that I focus on the absolute most. Yep. And I will say, going back on the berries, if it's bright and beautiful looking, absolutely does not mean it's edible. There's one that kind of looks like a little bean, and it's called a baneberry. It's red. It looks like it could be the most delicious berry in the entire world, and it will make you absolutely ill. So just because it looks edible, it doesn't mean it's edible. Another thing that is a survival myth. People say, well, are the animals eating it? Because if the animals are eating it, I can eat it. False. False, false, false. Animals' digestive systems have evolved to eat certain food sources, and they do not evolve in a parallel manner to ours. So if a bird's eating it, birds can eat things sometimes that will kill us.
Yes.
So that old thing does not work.
Yeah, think of like a vulture. They eat like the rotten, nasty roadkill, like the rotting, disgusting meat that you would not want to eat at all. Yeah.
Absolutely, but they're evolved to do it. I always tell people that if you have to parallel yourself with an animal, we actually have a very similar digestion capability with that of bears. So if a bear is eating it, likely it's going to be compatible with you as well. Now, that is not 100% true. but it's up in the 90% range. And so if you study a bear's pattern, a bear's diet, often we can mirror that of a bear.
Okay. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense. Very cool. A lot of stuff I knew about. A lot is similar to like northern Nevada. A lot of the same things going on in northern Nevada that are there in Utah. So we live in the Sierras, and it's like, oh, the Sierras are so big and so great. But then driving home, we made sure to come through the Rockies, when we came home from Denver, and I was like, oh my gosh, these mountains are like triple what the Sierras are. And just thinking about the wild forageables, I was like, the diversity that exists here is so extreme. And I've heard so many people like, oh yeah, I'm bugging out to the Rockies. It's like, dude, you better get your books out and start studying, man, because there is a huge range of availability there.
Mm-hmm. And in the end, as many things as there are, make sure that when you are learning your forageables, study the calories, study the sugars, study the carbohydrates and proteins like that might be in what you're going after. Make sure it's worth your time. Mm-hmm. You don't need to know every single thing. Like a lot of people say, can I eat that? I'm like, well, you can eat the grass in your front yard. Will it do anything for you? No. But will it kill you? No. But focus on the things, those superfoods, those great ones. And it is going to depend where you live. And the Rockies, as vast as they are, the biodiversity of just plants and forageables can change. You drive 300 miles and it can completely change on you. And so survival, like knots and shelters, can be very universal. Foraging is going to be very focused on where you live. And it's up to you. Or if you have a plan to bug out or a couple places, study. And there's a lot of really good edibility walks that people do. I teach one up at Snowbird. I also do one down in Moab. And guess what? The differences between Moab and then going up in northern Utah at the Snowbird Ski Resort is night and day. You may cross over 2 or 3 things, but you're different elevations and different environments, and it's the same state. So it's nothing's universal. Things are very focused. Just focus on maybe 200 miles around you and learn that very well, from 10,000 feet down to the lowest elevation.
What about nettle? Is there nettle out there too?
Oh, yes, there is. Yeah, and that is one of those things that you can actually, we could go out to the Sierras, and I know you have nettle out there. We could go at a lot of different places, and it's a great one. Another thing, watercress. Watercress, you can't find nettle, you can find watercress.
Fair enough.
And it's, and they call that the seaweed of the Rockies. And it's a great one. Make sure you boil it. There's some little critters that like to live in there.
Yeah,
a lot of people are like, where can I get watercress where I can just eat? I'm like, no way.
You can't. But it's so refreshing too. It almost is cucumber-like. It's yummy. Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, it's up to you to take the risk. But again, that's the whole. You have to evaluate and, is it really worth it? No. If you're just looking to survive, boil it up. Yeah. But between nettle and watercress, you can always keep something in your system, keeping you going.
So I want to break away from the wild forageables just a little bit and talk about some survival shelters there. So when we're out in the Sierras, we try to find areas where our fire would reflect off rocks and things like that for heating. So, I mean, are we looking at the same type of environment there in the Rockies?
Very similar. I've done a lot in the Sierras, and I approach the Rockies in the same way because we both like, especially right now, we're both dealing with a tremendous amount of snow.
Yeah.
And so snow, and if you've got to elevate yourself off the ground, pretty much no matter where you build a shelter, that shelter has got to incorporate getting you off the ground. In the summertime, you've got critters, but year-round, there's always going to be that moisture factor, and year-round, you're always going to be dealing with convection heat loss. The ground is always going to win the heat war. you are right on the ground, and you haven't insulated yourself, then it's going to suck all the heat out of you, and you're going to be freezing all the time. You're going to be wasting calories. So my two go-tos right now, when I don't have my hammock and tarp, and I hammock camp year-round. A lot of people think I'm crazy, but it's effective. It keeps me out of the snow, keeps me dry, and it is a quick way to set up a shelter. Now, forest lean-tos are probably the thing I build the most. Another thing before I ever get into building a shelter, choosing the right location will make that shelter go up in 20 minutes, or it may take you 5 hours. Because if you're having to haul in materials, we as humans, we like the city of Las Vegas.
Yeah, yes.
It was never meant to support that many people, but we go through great lengths to make that an ideal place. Now, that's totally artificial. In survival, don't fight against nature. Like you said, look for a heat reflector. One of the first things I look for is a giant log that's already fallen over, or a great big rock. So I don't have to build a heat reflector. Guess what? Yep. Boom, I just saved some calories because it's already there. Or just having a lot of dead materials. Okay, boom, my fuel is right there. My building materials are right there. I don't have to hike. Even 100 yards will make a huge difference. If you have to go back and forth 100 yards just because you want to camp right next to the stream, I think that it would be so much better to maybe make a trek to the stream, 2 times a day, rather than having to trek back and forth to get your other materials that you use far more often. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sorry, I digress on that, but
no, I agree.
Shelter, the other shelter that I use most often in the Sierras and the Rockies is a wickiup. So we start with just a basic tripod lashing, and then we just lay poles on poles on poles on that tripod. What's great is that if you're dealing with wind, no matter which way the wind is blowing, your support system is already built in to deal with it. And then weaving, it's a very minimal cordage shelter. The 100 feet of parachute cord I always tell people to have in their bug out bag will be taken up completely making a forest lean-to. It's going to eat up almost every last bit of it, and that's if you're being careful. The wickiup, or even the forest teepee, tree teepee, you can honestly just lash the very top, and that's the only cordage you'll need for the entire shelter, which is a benefit because your cordage is limited, and you should treat it carefully because it does run out. Those two are my favorites even when I cannot use my hammock.
Okay. Very cool. And that's pretty much, like you say, going to work anywhere. And the wind is a major factor. I mean, you got to think about that in those regions. Avoid
the ridges.
Yes.
Again, more than half, I would say 3/4 of your shelter success just depends on your ability to read a good campsite. Mm-hmm. Water, but not too close to the water. Wind won't get off the ridge. Is there some natural protections? Are you in a wash? Or I actually had a friend when I was younger, just outside of Cody, Wyoming, on a camping trip. He camped right underneath, and my cousin was present at the time. He camped right underneath a talus field of rocks. And then during the night, a rock rolled right onto him and killed him. And it took several hours to do so.
Wow.
And so it goes, or a tree that is old and dying and leaning, those widowmaker trees. It's a real thing. Think about the wind comes on. Trees do fall in the forest. Let them not fall on you. There's so many factors that will contribute to your safety and success of building a camp. I will also say this. In the event of a bugging out event, people are going to be the most dangerous element. It's hard for me to say more than nature, but in a mass event, people are more likely to kill you than nature is, or at least faster.
Yeah.
Concealment. Don't build something over the top that is easily visible. Be low key. Also, most people don't understand that your shelters are more successful when they're smaller, not bigger.
Yep.
A lot of people build their shelters too big. It needs to fit your body, or if you have two bodies, it needs to just fit two bodies. If you have three bodies, just fit three bodies. Less space to heat and less visibility. Let's be honest. And a lot of people have this mentality of, I've got guns and I'm going to go head on with the world. You'll get killed. Get out of the way. Be out of the way and maintain a low visibility.
Yeah, I like that. It's so true as well. Like, well, I know because we moved into this house is huge. You know, my in-laws have bought it. It's like 2,800 square foot, vaulted ceilings. You know, everybody, wow, your house is so beautiful. It is beautiful, but you know what? Like, it's too big. You know, there's no reason to have that much space and that much. There's so much to heat, to, you know, to maintain. It's too big. And it absolutely rings true even more so when you're building shelters. You only need to fit in it to stay warm and sleep, you know. It's not like
create a small microclimate that keeps you safe. That's it.
Yeah, you're not going to be having tea parties in there and whatnot. Don't worry about that, you know.
Nope. You're not going to be sharing any tea. It's our tea.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Eric. Well, that pretty much takes care of it. There's so much to learn. Of course, we're just scratching the surface. So anybody in those areas definitely needs to get out and do their homework. But, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about it because it's exciting for me. I really like wild foraging. And so to learn all the different ecosystems is really, really what I'm after. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is a great time of year to test your skills, the dead of winter. I always tell people to build their survival kits around winter time, and then you can adjust them and scale them back for summer. Most people do the opposite. So it's a great time to get out, test yourself safely, but know where you're at. And also, a lot of people that are very proficient in wild edibles are so in the summertime again. They're focused on summer and fall. Get out and learn wintertime foraging. It will change your perception and it will increase your preparedness and that survival knowledge bank, which is all we're trying to build up for people, including myself. I learn more and more each year, and nobody's the absolute expert. We're just all students, and we're all thriving to just be self-sufficient. And I hope just to make people hungry and a little bit more self-reliant.
It's so true. That's exactly where I'm at. Like, I'll just give you the tease so you go out and figure it out because it's super fun information to research. Also, one of the things I do is like when you do find something in the summer, put a little string on it and then you'll know what it looks like in the wintertime because the
morphology of a plant is huge. Yeah. We always get these falcon guides, which are great guides to edibility, but that one picture is like maybe just that one tiny stage of that plant.
Yes.
And so learn what it looks like spring, summer, fall, and in some instances winter. And beyond even that, once you do that, identify your main patches. I always tell people, if I have a square mile of mountain, at this point, I feel fairly confident that I could feed myself, but just myself. And it's, but it's because I already know the primary points of interest and resources of that square mile that I can make it work in my benefit instead of having to rediscover the wheel over and over again. I know that wheel works really well. And then I've got a couple of those in my own knowledge survival bank where perhaps that one area won't work for me. Well, great. I've got another one that will work for me. And redundancies built into redundancies, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, I love that. Plan to fail, you know, because if you're planning to fail, then you're already thinking about what can I do to once I fail instead of, this is going to work. Go back to your theory, right? I'll be fine. I learned all about it.
And even if you were a Boy Scout or even a lot of people that were in the military a long time ago, you know, like it's awesome that they did that. But continue. If you got that knowledge bank, make sure that, you know, that you're still out there. Keep the knife's edge sharp. You can have a great knife. It could have been the sharpest knife out there, but if you're not sharpening it on a regular basis, things do get dull. And so that goes with everybody. Sharpen the edge on your own personal skills every day.
Yeah, and that's one thing I try to feed them too, is like your body is the number one survival tool. So if you don't have your body in prime working condition, you could have problems there. You can't go out and forage. You can't go do those things. So, focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Movement is life.
So, well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. It was a great interview. So I'm so happy we finally got it done.
My pleasure. And yeah, just remember, if you guys want to learn more, I've got a great book series called Staying Alive. You can get that on my website, which is ericbetchersurvivalist.com. And I've got a lot of online resources. And then next time me and Sara are out somewhere, come say hi to the both of us. Sara's awesome books as well, and I'm sure all of you listening already know that, but I'm a fan.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Eric, so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your knowledge with us. Definitely just scratching the surface of what the Rockies have to offer. If you're in that area, I really suggest that you start doing your homework now, because it's a great place to be as far as wilderness harvesting goes. About time I got Eric on the show. A really fun guy to have met, and happy to include him upon my list of guests. Thanks so much to my Patreon members for your continued support. You guys are the rock stars. You're what make the Changing Earth podcast go round. Please head on over to Patreon and get yourself subscribed as a Patreon so you can get access to all those great goodies and help keep the lights on over here at the Changing Earth podcast. Thank you very much to all of you for listening today, taking the time out of your day to listen to the Changing Earth podcast. I try my best to keep you entertained and educated and loving every step of it along the way. Nothing I'd rather be doing. So until next time, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, Battle for the South, and Dark Days in Denver at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.